Jerry B. writes that he was 14 when what should have been an unforgettable, life-changing event happened to him. More precisely, it happened to him and his stepfather way back in the early 60s while they stomped around in the deep woods one misty October morning in Illinois. And in the years that followed, neither one of them ever spoke about it. Not one word did they share because they were unaware it even happened. And now it's too late because Jerry's memory of the event only returned recently after his stepfather passed away from a well-aimed, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. So the woods where Jerry's memory took place were a generally ignored expanse lurking at the outskirts of town, where decades of undisturbed grasses and twisting trees coexisted with the rusting wire boundaries of defunct factories. Simply put, the woods were no man's land, completely devoid of life, save the occasional darting rabbit or croaking frog, or the afternoon screech of a lonely katydid, calling from anywhere of 1,000 different shadowy entanglements along the bank of the creek that gently meandered, almost snake-like, through the woods. It was a place of isolation, and Jerry loved it. One afternoon, with his trusted .22 caliber rifle in hand, as he's traversing the banks of that creek, Jerry spies what looks like a child's wagon not far from the bank of the creek, but sitting back just a little bit. And upon closer examination, the size was about right, but this metallic-looking two-tone thing that was light gray on the top and light blue on the bottom was shaped a little bit differently than a wagon. There were two tubes extending the length of this thing on the bottom, one on either side, with a box on the top, almost like a pontoon. And Jerry thought, oh, this is going to make a great raft. And he could just picture himself standing on that little box platform with his fishing pole in his hand. Just put it in a good pond. Yep, fun was going to happen. And then the idea that it could also make for a good spaceship popped into his head. Now, he's a bit confused by that last thought because it actually felt like it came from somewhere outside of his head. And he just stood there looking at this thing, looking at the odd tubes on the bottom and the fact that there was no place for wheels and noticing its streamline design. And it appeared to be metallic. He had no clue as to what this thing was. Whatever it was certainly off the beaten path. And he figured it didn't float down the creek because it was too far up on the bank to have come that way. And it made no sense to have somebody drag it here just to abandon it. But as much as he wanted to take this makeshift raft home, he finally conceded that it was just a little bit too much for him to lug home on his own. But then he thought, well, maybe he could ask his stepdad for some help. So he went home, told his stepdad what he had found, and asked if his stepdad would go back with him the next day to help him bring it out of the woods. And his stepdad said, sure, I'll go with you, but first we're going to figure out whether it's worth lugging out of the woods or not. So the next morning came, and the two of them headed out to the woods. And Jerry had his trusted .22 rifle with him, which he usually used for target practice. But it also made him feel safe just having something to protect him from the unknown. But that day, he wishes he'd left it at home. Now, with some initial difficulty, Jerry finally located the object. It was so well camouflaged that they walked right past it. This is sure going to make a good raft, he said to his stepdad. But when he took a closer look, he was so bummed that there was a crack going all the way across the flat area. How in the world did he miss that? And Jerry's not sure who spoke first, but their conclusion was that this thing was worthless, impossible to repair. And as they turned to leave, a movement caught his eye, and he stops, aware of the fact that his stepdad had stopped too. But when Jerry went to speak or turn in his direction, he could do neither. He was restrained, literally frozen from head to toe. But being frozen didn't keep him from seeing the two approaching creatures. In no time, 2 huge and bulking, 7 to 8 foot tall humanoid reptilians were towering over Jerry and his stepdad. And he couldn't do a damn thing except stand there like a statue, silently screaming and extremely horrified. However, Jerry couldn't help but think, well, that's weird. They're wearing uniforms. And then he realized that's the second time in 24 hours that a thought has come into his head from somewhere outside of his head. And the uniforms were form-fitted and cut from what looked like brown canvas, complete with boots, gloves, and a matching skull cap. And surprising him equally, if not more so, was that one of them was speaking. He was hearing English, but he was hearing it in his mind only. The one speaking was loud and angry and addressing Jerry directly. And as he draws nearer, he asks Jerry if he had intentions of shooting them. Pointing toward the rifle, the creature gets right up into Jerry's face and asks him the question again. And at this point, the reptile companion steps forward and in a much calmer voice tells the first creature, "Stop. This is just a child. He's of no threat to us." Still unable to move and still screaming inside, Jerry strains his eyes to see his stepdad, and he can see him standing right next to him, tears streaming down his cheeks. Now, the much calmer reptilian was the one who seemed to be in charge, which Jerry was eternally grateful for, because that one communicated in a much more friendly, reassuring way. And Jerry and his stepdad learned that, yes, the metallic object was a spaceship, and that those two beings were here on a mission, the details of which they didn't share. And Jerry's fears were further quieted when the calm one told them, "We're not going to hurt you, we're going to let you go, and you're not even going to remember that any of this happened." Words that were music to Jerry's ears. And as Jerry settled down a little bit and his nerves calmed down, he discovered he was having a thought exchange with the being. The same way that you would have an exchange verbally, but just using your mind. And Jerry asked the being how it is that two beings as big as they were could fit inside that tiny toy-like spaceship. And he hears a chuckle. And the being says that they possess technology that allows them to shrink their spaceship. Because the smaller it is, the easier it is for them to hide. It was just by sheer luck that Jerry stumbled upon it. And he said the crack along the top was simply a mind trick made to make it unappealing so Jerry wouldn't want to take it home. He said that they were aware that Jerry was there yesterday, but chose not to confront him. The only reason that they did today is because he brought more of his kind with him. And the one thing that Jerry never found out was what these things actually were. And today, Jerry says there's really not a whole lot else to say. He says he does have a vague recollection of he and his dad walking out of the woods in a daze, trees and such steadily passing by as they plodded along, one foot in front of the other, neither of them saying a word as they headed for home, but with an overwhelming sense of relief to be doing just that. And Jerry doesn't know when his stepfather's memory returned, or if it ever did, but he does wonder about his stepfather pulling that trigger. Maybe he remembered. Now, whether you are just starting or are continuing your creepy creature bender, go right here for more mind-blowing stories. And we will see you again on the In-Between.